right, so let's go ahead and work on solving quadratic equations. You basically have two steps. You solve for x squared just like you do x. And once you've isolated that x squared, you square root both sides because square rooting, we learned last lesson that squaring is the opposite of square rooting, so it's going to be the reverse of that. Square rooting will be the opposite of x squared. And our ultimate goal is to solve for x. Now, there is a couple things to remember. What's different about, and these are quadratic equations because of this x squared, is when you square root, you're going to get two solutions. And that's because when you square a negative number, it becomes positive, and we talked about that. So hopefully you're okay with that. So let's just jump straight into an example here. Number one, start pretty basic here. Let's say we have m squared equals 93. Now I said isolate the x squared. This is m. That's okay. It's just you isolate the variable squared. All right, so since the m squared is already all by itself, you can go straight to actually square rooting both sides of the equation. And again, what you do one side, you do to the other. Now when you square root, that will undo or eliminate the squared, and it's going to leave you with just the variable, which is m. Now, square root of 93 doesn't come out nice and even, so you probably just got out your calculator, and you can round here. So we get m equals 9.64, or m equals negative 9.64. All right, notice the answers are the same, just opposite signs. We'll later on, way down the road, we'll get into stuff that's a little bit different. All right. So number two, again, just jumping right into an example here. We have b squared plus 7 equals 71. All right. So again, first step is you want to isolate the variable squared. So we have that plus 7 around it. So what's the opposite of plus 7? Well, it's going to be minus 7. And what you do to one side of the equation, you do to the other. The 7's there will add to 0, or sometimes you say cancel. I like to say 0 out. So I'm going to bring down the b squared. And 71 minus 7 is 64. All right, so now the b squared is isolated, so we are ready to solve this by taking the square root. So we'll square root both sides. All right. And we get b equals 8, because the square root of 64 is 8. But not only is 8 squared 64, we also have to consider negative 8. So b will equal 8 or negative 8. All right, last one, number 3. We have negative 3 minus x squared equals, let's do 22. All right, so on this one again, now that negative is with the x squared, so don't lose it there. So we're going to isolate that x squared. Now here's where you got to be really, 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 really careful, okay? This minus 3 in front, the opposite of minus 3 is plus 3. So we're actually going to add 3 to both sides. And again, very common thing is to lose this negative. So be really careful right here. So you have negative x squared equals 25. Now we're not quite done yet, because what we have here is we have an invisible negative 1. And it's being multiplied. So what is the opposite of multiplication? Well, it's division. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1. All right, when I do that, when I divide by negative 1, I get x squared equals 25 divided by negative 1 is negative 25. Now here's where you got to be careful. All right, yes, your last step here is to square root both sides. But here's my question to you. Look at the 25. It is negative. Okay, can you square root a negative? Now, let's talk about why you can or you cannot. So remember what the purpose of solving an equation is. The purpose of solving an equation is to find the value for x. So right now, what this is saying right here, well, I tried to change colors and it didn't want me to. All right, what you're trying to do right here is you're trying to find the value for x that when you square it equals negative 25. So can you square any number and get negative 25? A lot of people will jump in and say, well, negative 5 squared. Well, that's you can't. Negative 5 squared is negative 5 times negative 5. What did two negatives make? Makes a positive 25. So this cannot happen. This cannot happen. You cannot square root a negative. So what do we say? We simply say that this has no solution. Later on in your math career, you could possibly learn that it has no real solution. We can actually solve and call it an imaginary solution. Not sure that we're going to get to that this year, or in summer school. But so you get no solution there. So when you solve an equation, if you go to square root something and you're trying to square root a negative, you can stop at that point and say, oh, there's no solution. All right. If you have any questions, let me know.